This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Okay, Ian, we're recording. Welcome to the show, my old friend, as I had just stated, since we go way back to a couple years ago you came on the show, and then I've been on your show. So we are at this point old friends.
We are podcast pals.
We are podcast pals. Ian, how are you? Thanks so much for being here.
I'm really wonderful. Life is just continuing to unfold as a great adventure, and yeah, I'm stoked to spend some time with you.
I love it. Well, I mentioned this to you, and my listeners know that when I have a guest on for the second time, which is not as, it's getting to be a little bit more common of an experience at this point, with having done this show for 8 years, eventually, people are going to come on more than once, but it still is a little bit more of a rare occasion. And so to commemorate the occasion, I always welcome my guest and I have them give a 201, but then I present them with a very, very special gift. And that is, I don't know if you're a fan of Saturday Night Live. I'm a fan of Saturday Night Live, but there's a tradition on Saturday Night Live when somebody hosts 5 times, they get inducted into the 5 Timers Club and they receive a velvet jacket that has a number 5 on it and all of that. Like Steve Martin often presents it. And so here on the show, you are being presented with a very imaginary velvet jacket. Steve Martin, just imagine Steve Martin is presenting it to you, Ian. It is an imaginary velvet jacket with my face on it. And the Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder 2 Timers Club imaginary velvet jacket. Someday it will be real, but for now I'm presenting you with the imaginary Steve Martin is presenting you with the imaginary velvet jacket. So just say congratulations.
Thank you so much. I will imagine putting it on as we speak.
Yes. And it's whatever color you want it to be. Some guests want it to be like magenta, fuchsia. I've had a couple say like sequin with velvet, so it's really up to you. It's your style preference. So, anyway. It's always just a fun thing that we do to commemorate your welcoming back on the show. So, and then the second thing is for you to give me the Ian 201. So give me the Ian 201. So what you do, what you've been doing since we last chatted. And I don't even know if that was like pre-pandemic, might have been pre-pandemic. I don't even know. So what all has been going on and what's on the docket for you right now?
Yeah, wow. So, so much. My work with the Enneagram continues, Typology, my podcast continues, coaching, and sort of therapeutically informed coaching with people, songwriting. I've been doing some songwriting.
Nice.
I know. Did you know that I used to be a songwriter?
Okay. I know that I think we had a conversation the last time about you being a musician at some point, but I don't know that you were a songwriter. Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit more about your current songwriting endeavors?
Yeah, I just did a couple of co-writes with great artists, but all for Netflix shows, that kind of stuff.
Okay, can you give me
so is this Syncs? Top secret? Yeah, we don't. We've been writing for Netflix shows. We're waiting for cuts, but you just show up in the barn and you get to work and put it in the library and hopefully one gets picked up, so that's the kind of, it's not my living anymore. So it's just fun. It's avocational.
Is this just like a passion project type thing? That just sounds so fun. What a dream.
It is. It's really fun. And it's stokes a whole artistic funny bone for me that needs to be paid attention to. So, so I've been doing that, moved into and renovating a very old home. And I've got this new book, The Fix, and right now that is the sole focus of my attention, is getting word out about that book, which I'm really stoked.
Well, I am so excited about this. And also just congratulations on all those things. So many fun things. But I have been looking forward to this book coming out since I guess last spring. You mentioned it to me when I was on your show just before we were recording. You were like, "Oh yeah, we gotta talk about that next year." And now the time is here. But it's just crazy. But it's called for the listeners. It's called The Fix, and it is out January 28th. And it is how the 12 steps offer a surprising path of transformation for the well-adjusted, the down and out, and everyone in between. And as somebody who grew up the daughter of two alcoholics, recovering alcoholics, and who grew up attending AA meetings on a regular basis. I'm incredibly excited about this book, and I've already had a chance to dig into it some. I have not finished it yet, but I'm mostly there. And it's phenomenal. And so before I kind of get deep down into the depths of the questions that I kind of have and what I wanted to talk with you about, I would love for you to kind of just give the overarching kind of what I call the 36,000-foot view of where this book came from for you, why you wanted to write it, why you felt like this was the time for it, and just the genesis of it, so to speak.
Yeah. So I've been around 12-step recovery rooms since 1987. And so I'm really familiar with the 12 steps. And what I wanted to have happen was for people to realize that, they could derive the same benefits from living a life organized around the 12 steps that people in the rooms of recovery experience every day, right? It's like the 12 steps are not just for alcoholics, drug addicts, overeaters, gamblers, spenders, shoppers, or whatever 12-step program you happen to be in. Like, first of all, everybody's on the addiction continuum somewhere.
Yes.
And everybody can, experience the same liberation, joy, freedom, and happiness that people that self-identify as addicts or alcoholics do. And I just wanted to democratize them. I wanted people to know what I know. And so excited for people to realize that what's going on maybe in their church basements is really magical. And that the people upstairs could get as much from what's going on downstairs as anybody. In fact, they probably really, at the very least, need to know about it, right? Everybody should be familiar with the 12 steps and hopefully practicing them.
Yes. Okay. So for people, I feel like we need to kind of give a foundation here. We're going to build a house together, so to speak. You're renovating a house right now. So we're going to build a house. For the people that have not, like you and me, been surrounded by 12-step programs, can you kind of give just briefly the 12 steps of what they are and why they are important? Because I feel like that's going to help us just give that good foundation for this.
Okay, I'm going to go a million miles an hour just for the sake of efficiency. Okay, so steps, the way I break down the steps is to say that steps 1 to 3 are about getting your relationship with God straightened out, right? And then steps 4 to 7 are about getting your relationship with yourself straightened out. Steps 8 and 9 are about getting your relationship with other people straightened out. And then steps 10 to 12 are about how to create or cultivate a lifestyle that supports growth and health in each of those domains of your life moving forward. Right. So steps 1 to 3 are, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, but you can insert whatever your particular addiction or your self-destructive behavior or whatever in there, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4 is made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5 is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And then 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to our fellow sufferers, if you will, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So that's a very quick rundown of the steps.
So good. And I've heard them 10,000 times in my life.
Yeah.
And they still hit every single time. Well, you kind of alluded to this, and in your book, you describe addiction. And I love that you said this first in that step 1 is admitting you were powerless over alcohol. But again, you can kind of insert whatever here. And so you describe addiction as a response to the big ache. and this is something you talk about in the book, and it's this big ache of living in a broken world. And so if the ache itself cannot be fixed, what is the balance between accepting it? So accepting we were powerless over whatever and working to actually heal from it.
Yeah, so it's not a binary issue, right? Like there's a kind of funny marriage or twinning of those two things. You know, powerlessness is initially in the 12 steps is just to say I'm powerless to stop this compulsive behavior that has a mood altering effect and negative consequences. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if you're
Yeah.
a workaholic and you get a mood altering effect from success and money and income and bonuses and just being needed and wanted and busy, and that has negative consequences, like you're not spending enough time with your family, your health is in peril because you work too much, etc. Right? Like, you're powerless over, you just can't stop, right?
Right.
Like, and you're trying to fix a big ache
Right.
inside uh, apart from God, right? You're just trying to make life more tolerable
Right.
apart from any involvement from God, right? So it's your little fix, right, for the problem. And what I'm saying is that, you initially say I'm powerless over that. And then once you get into the steps, you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm pretty much powerless over mostly everything in life. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like you just have this realization like, oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute. It's not just about my workaholism or my overeating or my this. It's like I'm pretty much powerless over everything. And when that happens, there's this kind of incredible relief and weight that comes off your shoulders. It's like, someone else is going to take care of this,
Yeah.
And that's what the next, and then as you go through the steps, they build one on top of the other until it creates a new house in which you can live.
Yeah, that's so good. You kind of catalog this list of modern addictions. And it's kind of from, Netflix to people pleasing to workaholism to just anything. I almost like was kind of thinking about like an addiction Olympics. So
Yeah,
like
right.
had an addiction Olympics. What do you feel like humanity as a whole is going to consistently medal in? Like, what do
Oh,
you see in
what a
your
great question, Molly. Oh, that's yummy. All right. So, all right. Well, a couple of things. Like one would be control.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes.
Everybody is addicted to their need to subtly or not so subtly try to control people, places, or things. And
Yes.
it invariably lands up making their lives and the lives of others very uncomfortable.
Have you read, not to interrupt you, but have you read The Cost of Control by Sharon Hoddy Miller?
No, but I love the title.
Yes, it's so good. You should 100% read it.
I'm
I'm
going to
not
get
just
it.
biased because Sharon is my friend, but it's called The Cost of Control, and it's basically like why we crave it. Why we crave. I can't remember this, but it's like and the power that God actually like gives us. But one of the things that she talks about, she all harkens it back control as an issue to how the anxiety that it causes for us. Control actually like fuels our anxiety, but she harkens it back all to Genesis 3. And
Yeah.
when we went for that apple, that was this seeking of control, and how it actually, like when we want to control our spouse, when we want to control our kids, like it's all about image management. And it actually in the end, like it's going to cost us a break in that relationship. It's going to cost us a conflict. It's going to cost us all of these things, and it's going to just fuel our anxiety. But as you were talking about that, it just immediately reminded me of that, and so I felt like I needed to tell you that you need to go get that book. So
I just wrote it down. So,
yes.
all right. So then the other one is
Yeah.
everybody's addicted to playing God, which is
Ooh.
sort of a variation on a theme of control, but it's
Yeah.
actually even more broad, right? It's like everyone's addicted to this game of trying to bolster their own ego and
Yeah.
to play God and to be like the star, the director, and the producer of the little movie titled My Life, and they just want to play God. And so this is just basic. Like if you are a person of faith, this is just like Bible 101 stuff, right? But people actually don't actually wrestle with it. Like it's like, oh yeah, okay, I will give my assent to that theological idea, but there's actually they don't have a plan, right? Like they don't have a plan.
Right.
Like, what am I going to do how can I engage in this process of transformation? And that's what the 12 steps give, right? It's like, I went to a 12-step meeting this morning, and someone said, until I got here, I didn't have a plan. Like, I love those meetings because you've been to them, right? Like, the best
Yes.
stuff gets said. I hear stuff in those meetings all the time. I'm like, whoa. Like, I've been to seminary twice. I have 2 seminary degrees. I've been to seminary 3 times, right? I'm like just a thesis short of a doctorate. And I'm like, why didn't anyone else ever say that to me? And this 19-year-old over here in a leather jacket and, chaps just said something, the most amazing thing
Yeah.
I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And the 12 steps offer people of faith, or not of faith for that matter, a plan for experiencing transformation at the deepest levels of their person.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, and especially like as you're talking about like control and playing God, like this addiction to these things that even if people don't explicitly realize or name them. I mean, I think we could really, if we really wanted to like tease this out, I think you can really take every single addiction that people struggle with and you can boil it down to probably one of those 2 things, where they feel out of control because of some other big ache in their life, or they feel out of control because of XYZ, or and so in turn, as a form of control, they're turning and they're like, well, I can open this bottle because I can control that.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to open up social media and I'm going to scroll for an hour. And even though they can't actually control it, they feel like it's giving them that dopamine of, oh, well, I feel good. So I feel safe and I feel in control, even though it's actually doing the opposite. And it's just, I had never really thought about that till as you're saying that. I'm like, I think that that's really just at the root of all of it.
Yeah. The 12 steps really paint this incredible picture of the human person, and they give you this ability to do the work in a way that doesn't make a lot of space in the room for shame. It's just like, this is the crap humans do. And, but there's a solution, as Bill says, the guy who wrote the 12 steps. And, we can avail ourselves of it and experience as much, serenity, peace, okayness in the world as anyone is entitled to have. It's like, there's no solution to the big ache ultimately, right? I mean, there's, except death.
Yeah.
Death is the really big solution to the big ache. So, but we can live in a way that we regard it differently,
Right.
and we live in a peaceful way with what's true about the world. And the steps have taught me how to do that.
Yeah. Well, and then kind of, as we tease it out even further, you even say that denial itself is an addiction. So we have these addictions to control, playing God, to all of these things, that we've all gold medaled in. Like, let's be honest. And if you're listening right now and you're like, but I haven't gold medaled in playing God or control. So let us introduce you to the next addiction that you talk about in your book, which is denial. And you say that denial is this addiction that kind of slinks around in our psyches. And so I'm curious for you, what has been a way that denial has slinked around in your own psyche and kind of dressed itself up in your life, and how did you finally recognize it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and what's so interesting? People who say, I'm not a very controlling person. I'm like, really? Well, do you ever use your passivity as a way to control other people? Because some people are like, oh, I just think of aggressive, assertive people that are controlling. And I'm like, no, some of the most controlling people I know are the sweetest, kindest people who are always accommodating other people's wishes and being, it's like, no, you're actually doing that in a way that's really calculated and manipulating. And, and so maybe you ought to look at your kind of like denial about that. So, these problems come in, like, sometimes they come wearing like disguises, it's like, and you don't recognize them for what they are.
Right. Yeah. They just get dressed up.
Yeah, they get dressed up. So, for me, I mean, the good thing about, here's the great thing about being an alcoholic or drug addict, right? It's like, eventually your problem becomes public and everybody kind of goes, you're screwed up and you need help. And then they send you off somewhere where you can work on yourself for 30, 60, 90 days and really get your life back together, right? That's actually a gift. We call that the gift of desperation. Denial gets stripped away and you're like, oh, I'm screwed, right? And I really feel sorry for people who have secret addictions and compulsions that they can't shake. And they're just, like Thoreau says, living lives of quiet desperation. And there's really no, quote unquote, treatment center for workaholics or a treatment center
Mhm.
for, I mean, they are expanding these things, but honestly, but the good news is that people can take advantage of the steps and work on those things. And actually, I would say, even if you're somebody that's like, fairly low on the addiction continuum, or maybe you're just not convinced at all. I'm just telling you, the steps will make a big difference in your life as well.
Right, right. Well, and I think that actually leads kind of to one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and that's you talk about, I mean, obviously in step 4, which you named earlier, it calls for that searching, the fearless moral inventory, which you refer to as hugging the cactus,
Yeah.
which I love that imagery so much. Like it's so good. And so I kind of have a two-part question here. So the first part is really like, what would be your convincing argument for why everyone needs to hug a cactus? And, especially for some that maybe think they're like, oh, well, my addiction's like not that bad. Like, it's not bad enough to need a 12-step program. Like, why do you think everyone needs to do that step 4, that hugging that cactus? But then kind of the second part of my question is, for you, what has been an unexpected kind of insight or something that you've gained from hugging your own inner cactus?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if I forget the second one, remind me when we
Yeah,
get to
I
it.
will. I got your
All right.
back. Sorry.
So, why is it important to hug the cactus? Well, here's one reason. All human beings have parts of themselves that they have deemed unacceptable and
Mhm.
amputated
Yeah.
and put into what we call the shadow. They just don't want to look at it. I'm a jealous person. I'm an envious person. There's just things about themselves they don't want to acknowledge.
Yeah.
And the problem is those things will end up, because they're not facing them and addressing them, governing their lives from the shadows, right? It doesn't mean they go away. It just means they go underground and
Yeah.
they're still operating,
Yeah.
and in ways that you don't see or appreciate the gravity of, right?
Mm.
So when we do a searching and fearless moral inventory, what we're doing is, in a non-blaming, non-shaming, kind of dispassionate way, saying, okay, what's the truth about my life? Because
Mm.
the one thing that stands between you and your becoming the person you want to become is the truth.
Yes.
Okay. Like
Yes.
it's the truth. And
Yeah.
so you're going to have to go inside and go, yeah, you know what? I am a person who struggles with codependency, and I am a people pleaser, and I'm going to have to, and the list, and you're going to have to go in there and make a catalog of what's going on.
Mm.
And that's called hugging the cactus, right?
Mhm.
That's where you're like, oh, I really don't want to look at this, but I'm going to have to actually accept all the unacceptable parts of myself in
Mm.
order to get well. And this is the key, right? It's like, it's not to blame or shame. It's to say, welcome home to all these pieces that have been running your life anyway from the shadows, and to say,
Right.
uh, we need to work together here, and to be able to lead them in a new way. But the parts of you that you have rejected all your life, all the quote unquote crappy, sinny stuff going on in there, is
Right.
actually still at work. And until you welcome it home and accept the unacceptable about yourself, you will never accept that you've been accepted by God. And that's really important work.
Man, that's so good. One thing before I actually get to that, reminding you about that second part of that question, just as you were talking, so I started seminary. I'm in seminary for the first time, not the third. So yeah, I started seminary in September. And one of the classes that we're taking is a spiritual formation class, mentored formation. And I will tell you, this class, going into it, I really had no idea what I was like to expect. And I will tell you, like, I'm hugging my cactus a lot.
Nice.
And
Nice.
it is, but I'm telling you, like, it's really, really powerful. And there's a couple pieces to this that I think have been really interesting. And one, an exercise that we've had to do is, as we've kind of engaged some of our learning practices this semester, as we've like kind of looked at different formation needs, and, whether it's humility or awareness of God's presence in our life or whatever it is, we've had to kind of recall and reflect as we're doing it. And one of the things that one of the professors talked about is like, if you don't do it right while you're in the midst of it. And I had never really heard of this, but it makes total sense. And for some listening are probably like, oh yeah, duh, don't you know this? Well, so our brain has something called recall bias. And so the recall bias is, if you were to go through a challenge or do an exercise in growth, whether it's physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, whatever, and you go to reflect on it after the fact, your brain is actually wired. It's something called recall bias. Your brain is wired in a way to make yourself actually look better, and like you did better than you actually did. And so instead, what we have to do is we actually have to like journal and recall and reflect while we're in the midst of it, so that we are fighting against recall bias to be like, actually, like, didn't do this well, or this was really hard, or I forgot this part, or I just completely skipped over this because it was too hard, or whatever it is, because you're trying to fight against that recall bias. And so I feel like when we do some of these things, when we hug our cactus, like if we actually take the time to sit down and like you said, like what stands in between us and the growth is the truth, is by actually like sitting and writing it down in the moment to kind of fight against that recall bias of like, oh, I'm actually not that bad. It wasn't that terrible, because time and space will give us this like our brain protects ourselves from remembering the really hard traumatic part of it, whether it was like a big or little t trauma, right?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the cool things about the 12 steps is, at least in my experience, is it's not a very shamey experience.
Yeah.
When you actually, like, I was taught when I'm doing a fourth step, making this moral inventory, like, just be kind of like neutral about it. Like, in the big book of AA, which is sort of the big text that people in the program read, it's almost like you're a shopkeeper going through the grocery store, and you're looking at the tomatoes and figuring out which ones are good to sell still and which are rotten and need to be thrown out. So I'm just going through and looking at my stuff, right? All the good and all the great. I mean, all the great and all the not so great, right? And I'm just saying, oh, this is something I got to work with, and this is another thing I got to get rid of, and so it wasn't a very shaming experience, I mean, I guess everyone has a different experience of it, but it's a kind of a safe container to do the work of looking at your stuff and hugging the cactus.
Yeah, that's good. Have you read the book? I feel like you probably have, but have you read Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete
Yes.
Scazzaro? I just finished that book, and now I feel like I just need to keep telling everybody I know about it, and I need to read it 17 more times, because I do feel like that book in general, like it especially looks at a lot of the like family of origin stuff, and just really, in order to be spiritually mature, you have to be emotionally mature, which takes time. And a lot of times, like kind of this, like hugging the cactus, like that's all a part of growing in emotional maturity in order to grow in spiritual maturity and all of those things. Because when we don't do that, and we sit in denial, and we sit in control, and we sit in all these things, it just, like you said, it prevents us from growing because we're ignoring the truth.
So here's just a spiritual maxim, okay?
Yeah.
And you can use this in class.
Love it. That's me.
So actually, Calvin begins the Institutes with this great statement. He says, there is no knowledge of God apart from knowledge of self. So in other words, you can't know God unless you know yourself, and you can't know yourself unless you know God. So it's this kind of a weird kind of setup. And a lot of people of faith are like, I don't actually want to look at myself. I just want to get to know God.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to get all this information about God, and I'm actually going to ignore what's going on inside my life, right? In my heart, because actually that's self-absorbed. That's the excuse. There's denial. It's like, well, no, I'm not supposed to focus on myself. I'm supposed to focus on Jesus. It's like, give me a break. That's called spiritual resistance. You actually have to do both, and you won't know God until you know yourself, and you won't know yourself until you know God. And so you have to twin both of those. And like I said, one of the things you just mentioned that can step forward, that's what it does, right? It's like, I got to get to know myself. And then in step 5 is, I got to let somebody else know what I found, right? It's like, now I got to sit down with somebody and share with them all the nitty gritty details about what I've discovered about myself. And what that does, and of course, that's just the book of James. Hello. That's just a matter of saying, look, I don't need to share everything there is to know about me with everybody, but I got to share it with somebody. I got to find somebody with whom I can really do the work of sharing what I found inside.
Yeah.
Because what happens there is you expel shame. You find out that you're actually not all that creative and interesting. You find out that, oh, everybody else does this stuff too, or some variation thereof, right? You discover that, all of the little skeletons in your closet that feel so overwhelming and you never want to talk to with somebody else about. When you do, you discover, oh, like, I'm just a garden variety sinner. And then it's like, well, that's a relief, and people see that and they're like, I don't know if I want to do this work. It's like, okay, at your peril.
Yeah.
You can choose not to do it, but at your peril. It's and the beauty of it is that if you do it, there's so much freedom and joy on the other side. I mean, you must have seen this with your parents, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, and I think, my mom's no longer living, obviously. So, as a teenager, I think I got it more from my mom as a teenager than I did my dad. And my dad sometimes listens to the show, so I think he would probably agree with this. My mom and I would really have the conversations where she would open up and be a little bit more forthcoming in some of her shortcomings. And she also showed me very early on, like, what it looks like to apologize.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I have brought into my own parenting is, sometimes, like, if I screw up, the first thing I do, like, is I go to my kids and I just be like, Mom screwed up and I'm really sorry. And here's
Yeah.
how I screwed up. And here's why I screwed up. And I'm asking for your forgiveness. And I'm trying to
Yeah.
then, like, teach that to them.
Yeah, that's step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. This is called sweeping your side of the street.
Yeah.
Just keep your side of the street clean. And by the way, I'm always like, people look at me like, wow. And I'm like, are you reading the same Bible I'm reading? Like, this right there. It's
right there.
It's just right there. So why don't you do it? Right. And it's not there to make you feel ashamed. It's not there to make you whatever. It's just there to give you the life you're meant to live. Right. Like, here's what blows my mind. If you're in a spiritual formation class, this is true. Right.
Yeah.
If you went to most churches, and I'll make a guess and say synagogues or wherever you happen to do your thing, and you say to people sitting in the pew, do you have a plan for your own transformation? They would say, well, not really. It's sort of a vague path. It's like, I go to church and I go to my small group and I do this. And it's like, okay, that's all fine and good. And I'm all in favor. Yep, good for you. But you don't have a plan. Like, you don't have a plan. And so it's like, you can expect to get all you can get from it without a plan, which is not as much as you should. Right. So
100%.
So the 12 steps offers us a plan. That's it. It's like, oh, here's my plan for spiritual growth. And it's available not just to those kooks who are in the basement and smoking cigarettes in the church parking lot. It's for me too. Yeah. And that's what I wanted people to get out of it.
Yeah. And it's a journey. Like, it's, my dad, he just celebrated this past summer. He celebrated 45 years of sobriety,
Woo!
And he still does. I mean, I feel like every time I talk to him, I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I just got off a meeting. I just got out of a meeting. Like, I'm about to lead a meeting. I'm like, how many meetings are you going to do a week? Like, he's still, and he's 80. He's still doing this many, many, many times a week. And he regularly talks about how, like, he goes through the steps frequently. Like, this is not a, like, you get to 12 steps and you're step 12 and you're done. Like, this is an ongoing process for sure.
Yes. Layer after layer after layer gets peeled back. Now, here's the deal. My sponsor, who I mention a lot in the fix, right? Because he's a very funny guy, really funny, super funny guy. And he's, my dad's as often as the case in the rooms, like people think that when they see these meetings on TV, like in Loudermilk or some other show, and I have never seen an accurate depiction of a 12-step meeting on television. They are the most glum, depressing looking group of people you've ever meet, and they're all like sitting around, like hanging on by their fingernails. It's like, that is not my experience, right? In fact, the rooms are filled with laughter. There's just a lot of joy and laughter in the rooms, right? Because people have found a common solution and they're like, woohoo. And so, I'm like always amazed that I forgot where I was going. You said something that triggered me, and then I got off into describing AA meetings.
I was talking about step 12 is not the end.
Oh, yeah. So my sponsor said to me, he goes, Ian, once you've done these steps a while, eventually the numbers fall away. And you just start reflexively drawing on the power and the wisdom in each of the steps as you go through the day. So, you get up this morning and you're really sad because your rotten 20-year-old won't live the life that you want them to live. You've been doing everything in your power to control them, pressure them subtly, not so subtly, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, all right, this is time for a step 1. I am powerless. I am admitting that I am powerless over my 20-year-old, that my life has become unmanageable, right?
Yeah.
And then the next step is I came to believe that, in this higher power that can restore me to sanity. Because right now I'm sitting in this car and I'm insane. I'm insane about this child, right? And
Mhm.
then the third step, I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him, particularly as it relates to my kid. I'm just turning my will and my life, and I'm turning that kid's life over to God because I can't control it. So, and now you realize, oh, that was the first three steps I just did. Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, so this extends well beyond the addiction, right? It's a way of life. It's a way of seeing the world that's utterly different. It's not just, people don't go to 12-step meetings just to figure out how not to drink or how not to overeat or how not to, it's like, no, I'm here to learn how to live on a spiritual basis so that it renders my need for these unhealthy fixes unnecessary. Like I just don't need
Mhm.
them anymore because I'm living on a spiritual basis and I am applying it in every area of my life. That's the cool thing about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I loved that question that you posed about, do you, like, if you walked into a church and you asked, do you have a plan for your own transformation? Because I think I mean, truly, when I until this summer, I can say that in 15 years, 14 years of walking with Jesus, like I had never really heard of spiritual formation. Like it had
Mm-hmm.
never been explained to me. I'd never heard a
Mm-hmm.
sermon series on it. I'd never
Right.
heard a small group leader talk about it. And now I feel like I can't not hear it, especially when with emotionally healthy spirituality, with your book is talking a lot about that, with John Mark Comer's Practicing the Way, and then this spiritual formation class. Now I feel like it's like all in my face, but I love that question of, do you have a plan? Because I think it's such a good question for people when they think that, especially when in the, let's just speak a little bit more narrowly in the church world. Obviously we can talk about this, and this is applied in anything, but especially in the church world, I feel like the American gospel, the westernized gospel, also always becomes this thing of, oh, well, you give your life to Jesus and you pray a prayer and then that's it. And it's like, no, that's actually not how this works. You'll never grow beyond praying a prayer on Sunday. And so it's like, sometimes I see in a lot of these and I don't want to sound like I'm dogging on the church, because that's not what I'm doing at all, but I feel like a lot of times for years we always saw like, oh, we had 25 people raise their hand this summer, and we had 18 people get baptized, and we're just like focusing on these numbers. And then it's like, okay, well then what happened to those people after they raised their hand and they prayed a prayer? What happened to those people after they got baptized? Like, did you help them walk in their new spiritual journey? Like, did you help them create a plan for transformation? Like, did you point them in a direction of like what it actually looks like to be a disciple? And that a lot of it is going to all boil down to, back to what we were saying before, is hugging the cactus, is like digging into admitting, yes, like we can say, oh, I admit I'm a sinner in need of a savior. Okay, name some of that stuff, because then when you name it and you speak it out loud of like, here's the stuff that is deep within me that is actually like really need of a savior, like not just I got drunk last night, or I lied, or I cheated, or whatever it is, like naming that like surface level sin. And oh, I'm in need of a savior because of that surface level sin. No. Let's actually identify like the root brokenness that is in there,
Yeah.
because that's when you actually can heal, right?
Yeah. So most people of faith, they get two ideas confused. One
Mm-hmm.
is they're living more by reformation than transformation.
Ooh.
So reformation is when you're just trying to fix yourself with your unaided willpower,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like, okay, I'm going to start drinking, I'm going to start drugging, I'm going to stop doing this, I'm going to start being nice. And basically, it's like they're just trying really hard to be good. Does that make sense? And of course,
Yes.
then they're never enough, because because good luck overcoming that stuff on your own unaided willpower. Good luck. Like
Yeah.
you
Right.
cannot fix yourself. And so, what transformation is, what happens when you give God consent to do for you what you cannot do for yourself,
Mm.
right? And that's what happens in steps 6 and 7. That's when you become willing to have God remove all these defects of character and humbly ask him to remove your shortcomings. Most people don't do that. Most people are like, I'm going to work really hard to overcome my shortcomings. By the way, who's in control now?
Right.
You are still.
Right.
You're going to be the author of your own salvation and transformation.
Yep.
Good luck.
Good
And
luck.
that actually leads to frustration, resentment, disappointment, and disillusionment in God. What you really need to do is figure out, and again, the 12 steps show a way to do this, to say, you know what, God, I'm powerless. I am powerless over my envy, over my codependency, over my anxiety, over I can't fix this stuff. I'm as a friend of mine once said, there was a guy who came into a meeting not long ago, and he was brand new, and he goes, I'm here because I'm out of ammo. Ooh. And you know what? Everybody who walks into a church every Sunday, the first thing you should say, we should have a little liturgy that begins with, hello, God, I'm out of ammo.
Man, oh my gosh, that's right? So good.
Right? I'm out of ammo. That's why I'm here. You know what I'm saying? And then what happens is then God is like, great, now I can be in charge. Ooh. And then I can take care of this envy thing, and I can take care. Now I'm not gonna, it's gonna take a minute, but turn it over to me, and I can take care of this for you. And that's opening the heart in the life to transformation. And that's, to me, what the gospel is about.
Man, that was woo, that'll preach.
All right, there you go. Man, that was free.
That was good. I know I mean, man, if we boiled down the entire conversation into just that is that, man. And I'm gonna say that to my pastor and be like, hey, Pastor Keith, next Sunday, can you just tell people that they're out of ammo? It's time for them to admit they out of ammo. Okay, well, I had asked, I feel like there's this still burning thing, because I'd asked that second part of that question a while ago, and I didn't want you to forget about it. And I feel like we've actually done a really good job of kind of teasing this out. But I would love for you to just kind of share as you have done this work, as you have hugged the cactus, what has been an unexpected insight for you that has really kind of turned the page on this transformative work, and let it not just be like this reformative work, but actually transformative?
Yeah, well stated. So yeah, there were a lot of things that have come up for me. One is I realized just how fundamentally fearful I am. You know what I mean? Like so much of my gross behaviors, and we all have gross behaviors, are just fueled by fear. I'm just like, there's always, I said at a meeting the other day, I'm like, I feel like, that sound you hear when there's like an overhead, like fluorescent light that's buzzing because it's not grounded. It's like, it's always in the background, and you just kind of eventually just like annoying, but it's always there. Yeah. That's what anxiety and fear is like in my life. There's always this, am I going to disappoint somebody? Am I in trouble? Am I not doing this right? It's like, it's always there. It's like this little voice, right? And so that was a really big, part of me that I had to take a look at and go, I really need to take care of that part of my life, or I need to give God consent to take care of that part of my life, and to become more God reliant than self-reliant. Because usually fear is also fueled by this really scary idea that it's all up to me to fix this. I mean, another thing that came up was, and this is sort of a derivative of fear, is like, I really worry about what other people think of me. Like, it's like so weird. I'm not a young guy, and I'm like still in 7th grade. I'm still in 7th grade. I'm in 7th grade still. And it's like, in fact, the stuff that ends up on my like my character defect list is like stuff that is so old. It's like, really? Still? And it's like, yep, still. Like, I'm still worried about what other people think about me. And it's like, and it's kooky, but it's like, okay, I got to hug the cactus. There it is. I got to hug that part of myself. But here's the thing. You cannot hate yourself into becoming a more loving person. Like, you just can't. I've tried, right? And there's a lot of people of faith out there who have just tried to hate themselves into becoming better people. You can't do that. You can't shame yourself, beat yourself up. You have to welcome these parts of yourself home and tell them you got that it's there, that all of you is welcome. You have to receive all of you back, to present all of you to God, and give God consent to heal these parts of you that continue to dog your life.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. My dad always says that, like, I remember asking him a while, because like I'm about to turn 40, and like I was kind of wrestling with like, I'm actually not afraid of 40. I'm not like anti turning 40, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't feel 40. Like I don't feel mentally 40. I don't feel like I look 40. I don't feel like when I think back to when I was a kid and I thought of 40-year-olds, like they just like looked, like I always like Home Alone 2. Kevin's mom, Catherine O'Hara, she was 36 when they filmed Home Alone 2. And I'm like, she looks 55. Like, and I understand that the haircuts of the 90s have a lot to do with that. But also, like, when I was a kid, like, I looked at Catherine O'Hara in Home Alone 2, and I thought she was a million years old. And she's 4 years younger than me now. So that's like a very jarring reality to come to grips with. But I asked my dad this. I said, hey, Dad, you just turned 80. Like, are you the same way? Like, am I going to be like this my entire life when I'm 80? And he said, mentally, I'm 26. He said, I do not, he's like, my body feels 80 at times. And he said, but mentally, like, I'm 26. Like, that's where I am. And so it's just kind of interesting how you said, like, I just feel like I still struggle with sometimes things that I struggled with in middle school. And it's like, how does this continue to plague us?
But that's what's so great. In the book, there's a workbook that comes with it, because not everybody's ready to go to a 12-step meeting. I mean, granted, right. I'm hoping that somebody who has a drinking problem or a drug problem or a major overeating problem or a gambling problem, I hope they read the book and get a lot out of it and go find a 12-step community to find healing. But not everybody's ready to do that, right? Although I think everybody should go to Al-Anon or Codependency Anonymous. I think everybody's a candidate for those two. But I digress. All right, so I'm hoping that people will say, all right, I really want to do these 12 steps, but I need a community to do it with. Because to do it alone, yeah, you'll derive benefit, but not as much as you will from doing it with 4 or 5 friends, for a couple of weeks and using the workbook and doing the work. Because what happens in the rooms is we share these things about who we are. And actually, it's like really freeing. And it's like a very grace-filled environment where it's like, well, of course, that's what humans do. Humans do baddie stuff. And you do baddie stuff to make your life work. And actually, that baddie stuff ends up causing more problems than the problem it was trying to solve. Right. And so now, there's a different way you can, regard it differently. So when I look at that stuff that I still do from 7th grade, I don't sit around and go, I'm such a jerk. I don't do that. I'm more like, oh yeah, well, of course. I mean, that's just, I'm a human and humans do that stuff. And I go to my meetings and I share it and everybody laughs because they do it too. And we all are working on it. It's not like we laugh and then just ignore it, but we laugh because we're working on it. But Bill W., the author of the 12 Steps, he has that great expression, right? You've heard it a million times, right? We are not saints. The point is we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. We seek progress, not perfection. And to me, that's my spiritual life. I'm seeking progress, not perfection.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. Fun little side digression. So when I was in, I want to say middle school, could have been late elementary, but I think it was middle school. When my mom was sick, we couldn't really travel like most families did. Like we had to travel in a motorhome because that was like, and it was like an old like jamboree. And because, then my mom could have all her like machines and medicines and all that stuff. And one summer we went up to Vermont and we went to the home of Bill Wilson.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's like a place you can visit. And long story short, so we go to, that's like what AA families did, is they went to the home of Bill Wilson on like summer vacation. And so we're at the home, and underneath of, there's like this beautiful barn on the property. It's a really beautiful house in Vermont. And we went, and underneath of this barn, there was a cat that had just had kittens. And I'm in middle school, so I'm playing with the kittens, and this one little black kitten comes up and kind of like crawls in my lap. And the lady there at the house was like, oh yeah, this cat, this like stray cat ended up having these kittens and yada, yada, yada. Long story short, the cat went home with us and his name was Wilson. And so I literally had a cat named after Bill W. So I just find that.
I love that.
Yeah. And so Wilson was our cat. He stayed with us like for a very long time. I don't even remember when he died. I mean, he lived a long time. But yeah, so I had a cat named Wilson after Bill Wilson.
I'm actually you've inspired me to name my next dog Wilson.
You should. And he was a great cat. Yeah. And then obviously, like I told the story in my book about how I used to, like when I was in kindergarten, play AA meeting with like my Barbies and my bear, and like bear would pick up 30-day chips. my parents my parents my parents came in my room one day and saw me like literally sitting with my like Barbies and stuffed animals all in a circle. And my mom was like, honey, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm playing AA meeting. And like, I was like, Bear fell off the wagon. Like Ken's picking up his 30-day chip. Like they have an intervention over here for Barbie. And I remember at that point, my parents were like, maybe we need to get like a babysitter when we go to these AA meetings. And then I'll tell you one more funny kid AA story. So then when I went to, because I didn't grow up going to church, because AA was like church for my parents. And I went to a Catholic mass, and I'd never been to a Catholic mass. And I was with my aunt, and we were in this big, Catholic cathedral. I mean, talking stained glass windows everywhere. And it was time, it's like the stand up, sit down, like all the things. And I'm 5 and have no idea what's going on. And then all of a sudden they stand up and they say the Lord's Prayer. And I'm like, I know this part. Okay. And so, I mean, I'm holding hands and I'm like saying the Lord's Prayer with like gusto and effort and excitement. And I'm, and for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. And, but like in the Catholic mass, like it stops, and I didn't know it stops. And so I kept going. And so I went, keep coming back. It works if you work it. And like, screamed it. And I'm shaking the hands. I mean, it's when I tell you, this memory is emblazoned on my brain, where the sound of my voice saying, keep coming back, it works if you work it, was like ricocheting off of the walls and the wood, and the entire Catholic cathedral like turns around to see like, who is this person? And then of course I hear like some chuckles in the background, like clearly some people who go to AA meetings. And I was just mortified. And I just remember the priest being like, my peace I give to you, my peace I live, like moving on from there. So anyway, so those are my my childhood AA stories.
Okay, so you're describing how most AA meetings end. Many
yes.
do.
Yes.
And what I love about it is, if you think about it, shouldn't church end that way every week? Keep coming back. It works if you work it.
That's right.
Sounds good to me. I mean,
that's right.
By the way, the other day I got these 2 coaching clients, and one of the guys who came to me, I love these 2. He is they're both wonderful guys, and they are new to faith, right? Mm-hmm. And they were praying for one of the first times the other day, and one guy goes, oh, yeah, God, just like, we just pray we have a really be with Pete and his problem with his knee and blah 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 blah. And then he gets to the end of the prayer and he goes, just bless us today, and blah blah. And well, anyway, have a good day, God. And I said to him, I said, brother, I pray that from this day forward, you end every prayer with "Have a good day, God."
Well, have a good day, God. That is incredible. I thought like that.
I love it. I think it's perfect.
It's so
absolutely perfect. Okay, God, have a good day.
Okay, we'll see ya. All right. So like, I can't wait to tell my husband that, because like, so my husband, every time, he's like tall, deep voice Southern man. And every time he gets off the phone, like he could be on the phone with the guy from, the bank. Like it could be just a complete stranger. Every time my husband gets off the phone with someone, does not matter if it's his mother or if it's the guy at the bank, he hangs up with, we'll see ya. And so it always cracks me up, because I'm like, really? Are you going to see the guy at the bank? Like, are you going to see him? Because he's always like, all right, well, we'll see you. And like, that's how he hangs up. And so I'm like, that's how you need to start praying. Like when you close a prayer with God, it's like, all right, amen. We'll see you. All right, we'll see you.
Well, that would be good if you did.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. Oh my gosh. I have like 700 more questions I want to ask you, Ian, and we're out of time. But I loved this so much. I just felt like I got a lot out of this conversation. I hope people listening, I know that if they keep coming back, they listen to this again, it's going to work if they work it. But really, thank you for just for what you're doing with this book. And I just really pray, like you said, that it gets in the hands of not just people who, yes, I hope it gets in the hands of some alcoholics and some drug addicts and some people who need to get into the doors of a 12-step program. But I really hope that everybody reading it just it begins to employ those steps in their own life as a path of transformation and not just reformation. Oh man, it's just so good. Ian, thank you so much for being here.
Oh man, it was such a delight, Molly. You brightened up my morning and made me laugh, and that's always a good thing.
Well, thank you. And until next time, when you get another velvet jacket of a different kind.
Yummy.